I take refuge in the Buddha.
I take refuge in the Buddha.
I take refuge in the Dharma.
I take refuge in the Dharma.
I take refuge in the Sangha.
I take refuge in the Sangha.
Keeping the palms joined. Palms down. All right, good morning, everybody. Nice to see you all. Thank you for showing up. Anyone here for the first time? A couple of you, those who are here for the first time, what brings you here?
I want to learn more.
Do you all want to say that at the same time again? That'd be great.
I just wanted to learn more.
Yeah? Learn more about
Buddhism in general.
Nice. How much you know about yourself?
I'm learning.
There you go. I'd focus on that first.
Yeah.
That's harder. Buddhism is simple. Super easy. Us, way too complicated. Yeah, that's why we jump to Buddhism, because we think, well, I'll just figure that out and then I'll be good. But it's coming back to us. But we'll still have fun, so I'm glad you're here.
I just wanted to experience being here. I visited here years ago, and a friend invited me
Nice.
to share.
Yeah. Well, we're glad you're here. Welcome back. Another hand somewhere, I think, in the back. Yep.
Yeah, I took part in the food redistribution program this past Thursday, and I really enjoyed it. And someone told me about Saturday meditation.
Nice.
Yeah.
What did you enjoy about Thursday?
I think just the overall welcomeness of it. Everyone was so welcoming and inviting, and it just felt really good to serve.
Nice. Good. Yeah, welcome. Glad you're here.
Want to learn more about meditation? Been trying it by myself, and it seems like it's not working.
It's not working. Yeah. Yeah. That'd be a great book title, Meditation. It's not working. You know? Yeah. What are you expecting from it?
Well, like you mentioned, like try to look into myself.
Yeah.
Look into myself and get that. I'm expecting like more. I want to say like peace, inner peace.
Yeah. Cool. Well, we're glad you're here. You see all these people here? Quick show of hands. Anyone found inner peace yet?
Bits of it.
We got 1.5. 2 halves. So we got 2 total. So, that was a mistake? Oh. And Nirmal already withdrew his hand. So we're back to 2 halves equals 1 total. So I just, we've set the bar for you. You got that to expect. But maybe you can be the first whole person to actually achieve inner peace. And that'd be great. So we're glad you're here. To those joining virtually, welcome. Glad you're here as well. Thanks for showing up. We'll start with the meditation practice. A couple things to tell you before we begin. Nothing's going to happen to you, right? You're not going to float away. You're not going to have any mystical, magical experiences. The mind that races all day long is not going to shut off. Don't judge your practice, meaning don't ask yourself, is this working or not working? Are you doing this right or wrong? We're just going to sit. We're going to breathe. You'll hear sounds inside the room, sounds outside. This is life. Life is filled with chaos. And this practice is learning to get quiet and still within all of the chaos. Posture, if you are in a cushion, often it helps side of the front third. Pushing the stomach forward allows the back to straighten. Shoulders are relaxed. If you're on a bench or chair, however you're seated, also just try to sit up straight, relaxing the shoulders if comfortable. Hands are on the knees or lap, whatever's comfortable. I will guide us as we begin, and we'll settle into a little bit of silence. Those of you in the back, the couple of those middle windows, can you just open them, please? Yep, that one. And then that, yeah, there we go, perfect. Man, if everybody followed directions that well, this world would be so much better. Yeah, that's great. Thank you all. So I'll guide us as we begin, and we'll settle into a little bit of silence. Again, most important, do not expect anything from this practice. We're just going to sit and breathe. And starting with the eyes closed if comfortable, or slightly open. Mouth is open or closed. We'll start with taking 3 deep breaths slowly. And eventually, settle into a natural rhythm of the breath. Noticing the mind as it wanders, jumping from thought to thought. Start with gently guiding the attention, focus to the stomach or chest. Breathing in, feel them rise. Breathing out, they fall. Simply continue this practice, observing sensation of breath. As the mind wanders, lost in thought, recognize it. Release that thought. Return attention, focus to the breath. Where's the mind? Lost in thought. Return to breath. letting go of expectations, letting go of judgments from your practice, simply sitting, breathing. Keeping the mind alert, aware of each sound, each thought. Each physical sensation, yet concerned with nothing but sitting, breathing. Breathing in, follow breath in. Breathing out, follow breath out. And with the body still, rested, and the speech quiet, aware of all sounds, and the mind learning to settle. Know what it's like to just sit and breathe. Knowing with each breath, there's nothing else to do. Nowhere else to go. And no one else to be. Everything beautiful, exactly as it is. Sitting, breathing. And once again, taking 3 deep breaths, slowly. As you slowly open the eyes, slowly beginning to move. Most important with the practice of meditation is to recognize how you feel now, immediately after. Compare this to how you typically feel throughout your day. Recognize the difference, if there is one. Ask yourselves how you prefer to feel every day for the rest of your life. And know that however you feel now, if it's quiet, calm, and still, or a busy mind, racing mind, whatever you're sitting with at this moment, it's not from anything I said. It's not from how you sit, hold the hands across the legs. It's not from the sounds around us or anything else for that matter. It has everything to do with your own mind and your own mind's reaction to an external condition. This is what the Buddha called pratitya samuppada, means dependent origination. This is the basis of the Buddha's awakening. The word Buddha simply means awakened. He was a human being, no different than any one of us, who began to understand why he suffered, why he got angry, sad, depressed, stressed, anxious. He began to understand the causal relationship of all phenomena. And what that means, very simply for all of us, regardless where you come from or what you believe in or where you think you're going, your whole life is filled with things that happen. You react. More stuff happens, more reactions. That's it. This practice is simply learning what it's like to respond to something quietly, peacefully, still. Because for most of us, the way you responded to the last 20 minutes is quite different from how you respond to every other 20-minute period of your day. And so all we're working on is closing the gap to where the way you feel now is closer to how you feel always. Just as driven, motivated, productive, successful, whatever that means to you in your respective lives. But with a mind that's steady, clear, focused, distracted by nothing, disturbed by no one. It's not an easy practice. It's not necessarily fun. It's not an escape, as often people think it is. It is direct perception into the present moment. And the present moment is often filled with conflict, chaos, difficulties, challenges. This is life. This practice is learning to be with life as it arises and not doing what so many have done the majority of their lives, which is run from conflict and chaos and difficulties and challenges. This is learning to sit, to breathe, and be with everything as it happens. Meditation is free. Buddhist practice is free. It's just sitting, breathing, becoming aware of everything you think, everything you say, and everything you do. That's your karma, your thoughts, your words, and your actions. We spend so much time focused on everybody else's thoughts and words and actions. Hoping they do this, hoping they do that, wishing they would do this, wishing they would do that. So much time focused on what other people are doing. And this practice is not that. This practice is beginning to recognize what you're doing. So much of our lives we're pointing fingers at everyone else for all the problems they're creating. And I'm not saying there aren't people creating problems. I'm not ignoring that, nor am I avoiding that. But that's not this practice. This practice is about looking at what problems are you creating. How much fun does that sound? To think that we ourselves might actually be the cause of some problem in the world? Not possible. It's everybody else. So that's where this practice begins. Your thoughts, your words, your actions. And once we stop trying to change, control, fix, manipulate everything else and everyone else around us, and we work on changing our thoughts and the way we respond to the world, then we can bring kindness, compassion, love into everything and everyone we encounter. That doesn't change. But it's a practice, meaning it's not easy. There's an expression in Buddhism called against the stream, because the Buddhist teachings very much go against the stream of what we were conditioned to think and do most of our lives. Most of our lives we're not taught to think about everybody else equally as ourselves. Most of our lives we're not taught to think that other people are equally as important as we are. We're taught to defend and protect and make sure we are safe. And again, I'm not suggesting we abandon that. This isn't about avoiding or ignoring yourself. You are important. But so is everybody else. And that's the piece that we often miss. They too are suffering, they too are struggling, they too are facing challenges that you know nothing about. So, with that, I'll pause. For me, really just prefer to respond to questions, meditation, Buddhist practice, anything you're sitting with. And again, to those joining virtually, welcome, glad you're here. Thanks for showing up. If you have any questions or you just want to say hello, there's a chat box on your screen. Feel free to say hello, put your questions there. And we'll do the rest, spend the rest of our time this morning with questions. Yeah.
See, something happened like this week and I was feeling upset. I didn't express it, but I finally realized, oh, this is what it means to suffer. Before I never made the connection, I'm upset, I'm suffering.
Yeah.
So when I realized, okay, I'm suffering, where do I go? Because obviously the goal is to stop suffering. So or to be with the suffering, but where do I?
Yeah. Yeah. So a couple of things, again, virtually, or anyone who didn't hear it, was you said you realized this weekend at one point in time you were angry, and that was the first time I think you said you realized that the anger is really just suffering. You were suffering. And so then you started to say, you realized the goal, and you saw me shake my head no, so you changed your words. That was good. It was almost like instructing people to open the windows. See how quick that happens? And I'll come back to the goal in a minute. And so the rest of your question is really, when you are angry, what do you do? So the reason I kind of started to shake my head at goal is that I think I often talk about the danger of using anything with regards to Buddhism or meditation as like this goal-oriented thing, right? I mean, it sounds really nice to say we're suffering and the Buddhist teachings are to end suffering, but then you're just going to get pissed off every day waking up being like, yo, again, it's not working, right? This idea that, well, this Buddhist stuff doesn't work, I'm still suffering. Skipping the first thing the Buddha said, which is your entire life you're going to suffer. So it's important for everybody to understand that this practice is not thinking that all of a sudden someday all your suffering is going to go away. If you keep thinking that, you're going to be really disappointed. If you just wake up every day and say, yes, I'm going to suffer every single day of my life, then the bar is set. The problem is so many people think that all of a sudden their suffering is just going to magically disappear or go away because they do some Buddhist stuff for 5 years. No. You're going to be able to be, we'll come back to your question, you're going to be able to be with the suffering and see it for what it is, which is simply your desire and craving and attachment to wanting the world to be exactly how you want it to be. So again, it comes back to ourselves. I don't need to know details. I don't want to know details. Yeah, thank you. Perfect. Often people start sharing them.
Could be anything about
could be anything.
Upset. Yeah.
But the reality is you were upset regardless of what it was. And this, for those who don't know me, this is not saying that what people do is right or okay or, a lot of cruel, harsh things. So I'm not justifying anybody's actions. But at the very foundation of anyone being angry is the desire and craving for whatever it was that happened to be different from how it was. Mm-hmm. If whatever happened was in line with exactly what you wanted, there would be no anger. So we recognize your anger is rooted in your craving and your desire, as the Buddha taught, the second noble truth, the craving and desire for us to get what we want. So the first thing, back to your question, which is what do I do with it? You kind of said it in a way, but nothing in that moment. Because when you're angry and we act on anger,
make it worse.
Always makes it worse.
Yeah. And then you feel bad, and then you feel bad on top of feeling bad, and you feel worse and worse and worse.
Right, and then you end up here on a Saturday morning at 11 o'clock, right? So we see the cycle, and that's beautiful that you're seeing that, right? You're angry, you're acting on that anger, then now you feel bad 10 minutes or a day later for what you did, and now you're trying to unravel that before you even get back to what it was that initially made you angry. So I think a couple things very directly with your question is to just learn, if possible. I understand in interactions, it's like if you're having an argument with somebody, it's not always possible to say, you know what, honey, just pause for a minute. I'm going to close my eyes and take 5 deep breaths, right? That's not always going to fly so well in an argument. But if possible, try to just remove yourself from the situation and kind of simmer down a little bit. And then look at the situation and realize the impermanence of it. Meaning that in most cases, not all, but in many cases, I'm comfortable saying, whatever it is that we're upset about, we'll be upset about something else a day later, right? So sit with it, see the impermanence of it, meaning whatever the condition was that caused us to suffer, whether it was a person, place, or thing, that will change. have compassion for the person or place or thing, that understands that because they did things that caused us suffering, that typically means one thing and one thing only about what they're going through, which is they're suffering. So again, when we make this non-self practice not about us, we make it about them equal to us, they're suffering. So the anger we feel, the Buddhist teachings around the cause of suffering, greed, anger, ignorance, is to understand that we're overcoming that anger with the practice of compassion.
So basically that situation becomes my teacher in this moment to teach me to practice compassion or to be present with whatever is going on.
Yeah.
I'm thinking it's not fair, it's not right.
Right. Yeah. Karma Alexi Somo, the wonderful teacher, Buddhist nun for probably 40 plus years. She taught here for on and off for like 10, 12 years before she moved back to Hawaii. But she would always tell a story about where her master would say, anytime things arise, any problems, conflict arise, she would just say, blessings, blessings, blessings. Now, again, that is not saying that these blessings that are happening or have occurred are good or healthy or right. There's tremendous trauma and pain and suffering brought into our lives and lives of others, that seeing everything as an opportunity, like you said, as your teacher to learn from, doesn't make the act okay. Make sense?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. Thank you. What else? Yeah.
I have a question, follow-up of sorts, because I too am wrestling with something, a reaction that I am having, and so I hold with high esteem your invitation to view that as a teaching event. But
and you don't have to hold anything in high esteem. I just sit up here because it's the way they built the church 97 years ago. And when we first moved here, it made me really uncomfortable to sit up here because it looks like I'm elevated. And being a short guy, I'm happy to have the extra elevation so I can see. But please don't. You can drop the,
Well, no, truly, I see beauty in holding it as a teaching event. Can it not, though, and upon you both offering that resonates fully with me, but also what immediately came into my mind was, can it also not potentially reveal, though, my reaction, can it not reveal a desire? I don't know if I'm being articulate.
Yeah, all right. Yeah, just
a desire for something that I want, or that I want to become, potentially a healthy desire for growth.
Absolutely. No, beautiful. And just to give a context, have you explored a little bit of Buddhist stuff?
Barely.
Okay.
Dabbled.
Perfect. So the Buddha taught very clearly that the first thing he said is life is filled with suffering, discomfort, and this is the Four Noble Truths, that we all suffer. Doesn't mean all of life is heavy and traumatic and death and loss and serious trauma. We have those experiences as well. But it's also just, food made the wrong way, coffee's made the wrong way, traffic isn't how you like it. So there's these little things that happen throughout our lives that are not so heavy and traumatic that we experience dukkha, as he called it, discomfort, angst, dissatisfaction. The second thing, which is really the nature of your question, which is what is the cause? The second noble truth is the cause of this dukkha, discomfort, angst, dissatisfaction. And that is our cravings, our desires, right? To want the world to be a certain way, often referred to as the three poisons, greed, anger, ignorance. We want more. We're angry at how things are working out, and we're ignoring reality, which means we're stuck in thinking the world should be this way, when in reality, it's not. And because it's not, we're suffering. So to your question, very specifically, yes, the Buddha said there are also healthy cravings and healthy desires. The desire to suffer less, beautiful. The craving to have a kinder, gentler world to live in, beautiful. His entire body of teachings for 45 years before he died was, in essence, trying to help people cultivate a deep sense of craving and desire to diminish their suffering. So his whole body of teachings for 45 years was creating a desire in people to suffer less. Do not abandon that. The question is, again, without any specifics, which are really unnecessary anyways, is in that moment, whatever it is, that we are experiencing that anger and we recognize that feeling, to try to kind of step away from it, kind of philosophically, intellectually, literally, metaphorically, whatever, however you use that, and see, okay, where is my ego in this really? Am I really just trying to make the world a kinder, gentler place? Or am I, again, we just met, so I can't accuse you of doing this, or are we just kind of spinning it to align with what we think is right? And therefore we have kind of this this kind of self-righteous justification we can do. Well, these are my views and these are right, and this is what's healthy. So we have to watch that as well. But yeah. Yeah, for sure. Thanks for asking, sharing. Other thoughts, questions? There's a comment here. It says, it's not a question, but I'll just share it anyways because it's beautiful and cute all at the same time. Hello. Happy Saturday from Steve and Molly. Grateful for this time to take a short break from suffering. So, glad you're here, Steve and Molly. Yes, glad we can provide you a break from suffering. And when we're done at 12, you can go back to your suffering. What else? Questions? Yeah.
So I have a really limited knowledge of like Buddha and his life, but I thought that Buddha kind of like achieved the end of suffering, like through. But in his teaching after he became awakened, did he continue to suffer? Like, does he talk about
Sure.
his continued suffering, and was his enlightenment just his approach to then like dealing with that suffering?
Yeah.
Does that make sense?
No, great question. So your question was, to paraphrase for those virtual who didn't hear it, is that you have limited knowledge of the Buddha's life, in and of itself, and you have this idea that his practice was to end his suffering, and you have this idea that he ended his suffering. And so your question was, when he awakened, did he then suffer throughout his life? Yeah, fair enough. Okay. Very important to understand the difference between enlightenment, awakening, and freedom from suffering. Enlightenment and awakening does not necessarily mean that you're not going to suffer. Right? Let me start with the freedom from suffering part first, because of these two, that one's easier to understand. When the Buddha taught and was alive, without getting too much into this whole thing right now, because I just want to bring this point to make it very clear, they all believed in rebirth, reincarnation, continuation of consciousness. They taught at a time 2,500 years ago, 500 years before Christ, where for the most part they all believed in the cycle of rebirth. If you went up to somebody then and said you got one life and you're going to heaven or hell, they would have thought you were crazy. You go up to people today, 2,500 years later, and you're like, hey, you're going to be reborn? You're like, huh? Right? This is a Western culture. We're raised on Western religions predominantly, and so we don't grow up that way. So this idea of rebirth is very strange to most Western people. Keep in mind, at the time of his teachings, it wasn't strange. They all believed in it. And he taught that there is one guarantee to suffering. You referred to it, and I don't mean this in an attacking way, but you referred to it as enlightenment, is freedom from suffering. No. There is one condition for suffering. You know what that is?
Crazy.
Nope.
Life.
Life, more specifically? Birth.
Dang.
So close. Right? I hate to point out the fact that, yes, you are going to, let's forget about what the Buddha did or didn't do. You are going to suffer your whole life. And what the Buddha was teaching is to what's called free themselves from the cycle of rebirth. Did you show up here today because you want to free yourself from the cycle of rebirth? No. You want to not suffer. And so very often people, a day or 20 years into Buddhism, are still clinging to this ending of suffering and thinking they're going to get there someday. Now, nirvana means to, other than a great rock band, is to extinguish. So what the Buddha actually, when he died, he actually achieved, and this is very technical Buddhist teachings, which is irrelevant to pretty much all of us in this room. What he achieved is called parinirvana. Nirvana with no remainder, meaning no rebirth. They say when he died, that was his last life. The karmic chain, if you will call it, was neutralized. Body, speech, mind, no more thoughts, no more words, no more actions. There was no consciousness to continue and come back. he did not have a rebirth. No more suffering. Again, that does you no good. But I still want to address that part because that's a very important piece to your question. Enlightenment and awakening does not mean no suffering. To me, it is a practice. Enlightenment and awakening is an awareness of the suffering as it arises and seeing the true nature of it. So, when you suffer, forget about what the Buddha did or didn't do. Seriously. When you suffer, and you understand, one, that you're going to suffer your whole life, it makes suffering to me a little bit easier. Because you're like, oh yeah, this is what I signed up for. You know, I mean, you go to Disneyland, you want to get on the rides. Or you want to, you know, eat ridiculous amounts of food and get sick. You know, or whatever it is you do at Disneyland. So you get into meditation in Buddhism, you have the same attachment to this outcome, which is I want to end my suffering. For me as a practitioner, I've never said I want to end my suffering. I literally every day say, can I suffer today less? Less today than I did yesterday. As a practice, I'm not desiring or craving or seeking or searching for enlightenment or awakening or nirvana. I'm looking at if I am suffering and when I am suffering, what is the cause of it? What is the nature of this anger? That's what the practice is about.
Jeff,
Is that?
Yeah, that helps. Thank you.
Yeah.
the suffering isn't, if the bad thing happens, how I react, that's what causes suffering.
Right.
So maybe he reacted differently and the,
Yeah, I mean, I kind of, but since you're going in that direction, you know, I mean, so the way he died, he was poisoned. He ate poisonous food. I don't know about you, but if I eat poisonous food, that's going to cause a lot of suffering, right? Physical pain is suffering, right? Things happening that we don't like, which the Buddha saw everywhere, is suffering. But to your comment, at least suffering in the way that we might think of suffering. But to your comment, to me, my understanding of his life is that he observed these things as just the way things are. The causal relationship of all phenomena, dependent origination, pratitya samupata. These are the way things happen. But your reaction to it is the suffering. Whatever the anger, again, using that example, whatever the anger of the situation is, you're observing it for what's occurring. And then your response to it is your suffering. The hardest part for most people to wrap their heads around is we get stuck in wanting to be right and to prove that what they're doing is wrong. This is not that practice. This practice is not about proving what other people are doing is wrong and justifying our anger. This practice is understanding that you're angry and pissed off because you don't like how people are acting. That's it. That doesn't justify other people's actions. It explains your misery. That's it. Want to understand your misery, it is because you don't like what other people are doing. And the common response is, yeah, but. Again, not this practice. Yeah.
So then I suffer because my perspective on it. If I change my perspective, so in a way suffering is optional because I'm choosing to suffer based on I'm looking at it, but if I look at it from a different way, I may be okay with it.
100%. And in just like 6 months, you see how much you've learned? But, and you know, to that point, one of my favorite teachings from Thich Nhat Hanh is exactly that, where he says nirvana, right, to extinguish, right? So, not awakening, not enlightenment, but nirvana, freedom from suffering, to extinguish, as if a candle has been blown out, right? What he says nirvana is, freedom from suffering, is freedom from views. Which is exactly what you just said. You're removing your view and perception of a situation, and you're allowing to see it for what it is. And if we can do that at first, and Thich Nhat Hanh also, for those who've never been here or haven't heard me say this 1,000 times, Thich Nhat Hanh also coined the phrase engaged Buddhism. So I want to be very clear. It wasn't as if Thich Nhat Hanh, in my personal perception or view of his teachings, was saying, I'm going to observe the world, I'm going to see it's a mess, and I'm just going to kick back in all my privilege and do nothing about it. No. He was out there fighting with Martin Luther King to work to change an incredibly racist country. He didn't just sit back and say, this is my view, good luck. But he approached it without the attachment to his views, which for most, if not all of us in this room, would be filled with anger and hatred and rage. Which to me is still mind-blowing, because then you're actually just bringing anger and hatred and rage to a group of people that you think are filled with anger and hatred and rage. But you've justified your anger as being okay. Again, Thich Nhat Hanh's teachings to me are nirvana, freedom from views, are not about justifying what's okay and not okay. It's about engaging in the world and fighting to create change for a kinder, gentler, peaceful community. That's it. But you got to get past your ego and your anger if you want to do that. Otherwise, you're just going to continue to piss people off and get nowhere. And at the end of the day, the one who's suffering the most is you. Because you're too pissed off and angry to go do anything. Yeah.
So I get into the point in my life where I don't ask myself, why am I suffering? I just tell myself, it is what it is.
Yeah. Yeah, so to paraphrase for those virtually didn't hear, you've reached a point in your life where you don't ask yourself anymore why you're suffering, or is it suffering? You just realize it is what it is. Absolutely. What else? Yeah.
I'm fascinated with Buddhist statues. I don't see any suffering in those statues, and I don't see the Buddhist pointing to himself. And yes, Thich Nhat Hanh taught about nothingness, and yet the Buddhist has his hands open. You know, so it is not myself. What is in the hands that makes us not suffer?
Yeah. So to paraphrase that, your first thing you said, you're fascinated with the Buddhist statues, right? Yeah. So to paraphrase what you said was, you're fascinated with the Buddhist statues and this idea that, especially specifically with what they would call mudras, with the hands open, and if there is no self, the hands are open. What is that receiving? And if there is no self, what can you receive? And how is there any suffering? The first piece to understand is it's kind of a common expression / it always often brings humor, because the idea is that if there is no self, ultimately, right, then who is it that's suffering, right? There's a great book called, for any other fellow Jews or non-Jews, I think it's called Zen and Judaism. And my parents got it for me years ago. It's a phenomenal book. And it lists like all these kind of expressions. And one of them is around the teaching. Like, it has really good Buddhist teachings, and then it kind of comes in with some, if you know much about Jewish culture, humor. And it says, the comment is, if there is no self, then whose arthritis is this? And I thought it was really, when you were sharing that question, that's what popped into my head, was that, yes, so if there is no us, but we still experience these things, but we're not attached to it. And with the mudra specifically, the idea, first and foremost, just to kind of comment, is there are like endless mudras and postures for Buddhist statues, and they all represent something different depending upon the culture, where they come from, the teaching, even the artist, who kind of crafted it. And very often with both hands open, is this idea of receiving, and in the practice of gratitude and humility. Very often you also see arms open holding a bowl, because the Buddha relied on, he was a beggar. I mean, the Buddha and his disciples were, they were homeless, wandering beggars. And without the humility and gratitude, without the humility to be able to beg for support, he would have died. They would have died. Without the gratitude and deep appreciation for the support that was offered to the Buddha and the disciples, they never would have, continued on. And at the same time, the beauty of the care of the people who are offering to the Buddha, to be able to practice taking care of the Buddha and the disciples, the Sangha. So it's really an expression of gratitude and humility, the begging and receiving, and then the practice of generosity for people to give and support the Sangha. Yeah. So, all right. Any last yeah, and then we'll close. I think there. Yes, young man. How can we help you? Marcus, right?
So the more you live, the more you suffer.
Yes.
So if you're in old age, then you can suffer more or less.
Yes. And you're 8 now, right?
No, almost.
Almost 8. So wise words from Marcus, the 7-year-old, which were, the more you live, the more you suffer. But that doesn't mean that the older you get, the more you're going to suffer. Did I say that right? Yes. Thank you, Marcus. Y'all got that? He's 7. How long have you been trying to figure this stuff out? All right. So we're going to close on that because I just can't top that. We'll join palms. May any merit gained from this practice be transferred to all beings in all directions. May all beings be at peace. May all be free from suffering. May any merit be transferred to Gracie Hatch during her time of suffering and her healing and her family and friends who suffer at this time. May they all be at peace and free from suffering. All right, just a few quick announcements before y'all head out. Thanks for being here. My name is Jeff. I'm a Dharma Bum. We opened up this temple 18 years ago to introduce Buddhist practice to those who show up. Those of us who leave, we're not monks, we're not nuns, we're not gurus, we're not masters, we're not teachers, we're not looking for students. We're just practitioners. We do our best to take our understanding of Buddhist teachings and put it into terms that hopefully make sense to those who show up. Every night we have different practices going on, led by different people from a different Buddhist tradition. Every Thursday at 4:30, as mentioned earlier, I think it's probably one of the best things we do around here. It's a food redistribution program where we prepare gourmet vegetarian meals, also known as peanut butter and jelly, and we head downtown, carpool downtown, and we feed people who sleep on the street every night. So anytime you lack gratitude and appreciation for everything you have in your life, go feed people who sleep on a sidewalk, and it tends to put things into perspective. If it doesn't work, keep going back until it does. The first Saturday of the month, we have a half day of silence. So if 20 minutes of silence is absolute torture, I strongly recommend doing it for 4 hours. It makes 20 minutes much easier after you do it for 4 hours. A couple things coming up out of the ordinary. Monday night, Venerable Ananda, a good friend of ours, a Sri Lankan Buddhist monk, he'll be here Monday at 7 as a special guest. If you've never sat with any monks in general, but if you've never been with a Sri Lankan monk, they're really fun, they're beautiful, they're funny. And so Monday at 7 o'clock, he'll be here. And then Wednesday, many of you have seen in the past, he's been leading for us on and off the last couple of years, Bob McClure. He'll be back starting, we just kind of posted and shared that the other day, but he'll be back starting Wednesday night. He'll do a kind of a mindfulness, and it's called Walk with the Buddha. Kind of tying mindfulness into the Eightfold Path and everyday life. So he'll be starting Wednesday night at 7 for the next 4 weeks. And for those who do come on Wednesday nights for the Spanish, the meditation and Buddhist class in Spanish, that will meet downstairs, and Bob will have up here. So other than that, Buddha Food is there if you need it. Thanks for showing up. Be well and good luck.